sunshine or something sunny.
Okay, we should be live.
All right.
Okay.
So I'd like to call to order the Monday, August 24th, 2020 Board of Education special meeting. Ms. Bruno, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Rankin is not here. Mr. Kanzinger?
Here.
Mrs. Brose?
Here.
Mrs. Garvey?
Here.
Mrs. O'Toole?
Here.
Will you please join me in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
I
allegiance
pledge allegiance
To the
flag
of the United States of America
and to
to
the republic
republic for which
it
it stands,
stands, one nation,
Under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty and
and
justice.
justice for all.
Now is the time of the meeting where we would have audience and community participation. I have not received anything. I haven't heard from Phil if he did though. So hopefully we're not leaving anyone out, but Ashley or Bob, if you heard anything.
I have not.
I have not either.
All right. Having none, we will move on. So Superintendent Recommendations, Mr. Hunt.
Thank you and good morning. Two recommendations this morning. Thank you for coming in for the special meeting. I think it's important to have these in place before we start school next week. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Chagrin Falls Education Association, as well as our OPSI, which is our classified staff. I'm going to start with the Education Foundation.
Ashley, do you want a motion first?
We can.
Okay,
It doesn't, I mean, he can explain or we
Okay.
can do it now.
go ahead, Bob, or
Okay.
whatever. All right.
Yeah, I'm not going to hit every one of these items on here. The first section relates to health and safety. Most of all of the language in here aligns with either our operation guide that was presented to the board last week or our policies and regulations that we've put in place. I will point out to number 3, the day after we approved the operation guide, the state of Ohio released a K-12 face coverings guideline. So we've had to make some modifications to that. And that was more specific to face shields. They made it a little more stringent in terms of our ability to utilize those. Essentially, our teachers would have to fill out a form, demonstrate an understanding or demonstrate why the need is there. And then we could approve or deny that based on that approval. So that has changed since our last meeting. Number 4.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the reasoning? Are they feeling like the masks are more powerful than the face shields, so that should be a secondary choice?
Yes, I believe that is the case. I think that what they're finding is our masks are more effective in retaining, I guess, droplets, and that we should really think through where a face shield is needed and desired, and put that process in place. So originally we had purchased face shields for all of our teachers, and we were just going to leave them in classrooms. Now we're retaining those, and those teachers that need them for educational purposes kind of fill out a form, explain that, and then we hand those out.
Bob, could they wear both if they wanted to, and would they have to fill out a form if they wanted to wear the mask and the shield?
No, I think the form is more specific to wanting to not wear a mask. If you're teaching phonics or you're having a speech and language session where they really need to see your mouth, I think those are the scenarios in which the form is necessary.
So if they wanted both, we could provide a shield as well. Because I was talking to a teacher over the weekend who said she had heard, I don't know where it came from, that if you wear both, you're really protected. There's very, very little chance of the disease getting through both of those things. So I was just curious. Thank you for answering that.
Sure. Number 4 is we have spot substitution currently in our old schedule. This is an example would be if we had to pull a teacher for an IEP meeting or we couldn't get sub coverage on a day, we actually utilize other teachers to push into classrooms to cover that. It was typically paid per period. Obviously, we're going to a block, so the period is longer. So we kind of calculated that per minute to make fair compensation for our staff. Number 5 just gives us the flexibility if we go remote in terms of year-long supplementals that we can kind of work together with the union to, come up with a reasonable payment based on work and move on. Number 6 is specific to a teacher that is currently on leave, just to make sure when that teacher comes back, everyone kind of retains their current positions. And 7, this is an addition of long-term substitutes. We're looking at 1 per building in the district. We're doing this to kind of secure subs to make sure we have at least 1 in place per building. And we can also provide a little more training so these people hopefully, better understand the building, understand the people, understand the technology that we're using, and they're ready and on call. So that was number 7. The next section was screening and quarantine leaves. A lot of this really just articulates what is already in law, providing quarantine rooms, what's in law in terms of FFCRA. I think one point of clarity here. So if we have a teacher that is quarantined because they're exposed, but which would be 6 feet or 6 feet contact for more than 15 minutes and is required to quarantine. This allows us to work together and say, okay, we can make arrangements for that person to continue to teach virtually, maybe put a substitute in the room, and that would be done on a case-by-case basis, just based on content, how the teacher's doing, and those types of things. So that really highlights the majority of what's in this MOU. I'll pause. Any questions on the CFEA MOU?
I have a related question. Obviously, we would be notifying anybody that came in contact with an infected individual. What's your plan for making the community and the parents aware of any cases that are in the buildings without obviously disclosing the person, but maybe the number of instances that that any building's experiencing?
Yeah, so we do already have it in our plan on how we notify. We've been through this a little bit already with the county walking us through contract tracing and who has to be notified and contacted. Obviously, we have to protect people's personal medical information, but you can report out that you have X number of cases. And as the board knows, one of the things we're going to look at is pervasiveness or outbreaks in our school. So we will be keeping track of the number of students, the number of staff, and sharing that out as well. So that data is not something we would keep private.
Bob, do you think you'll be sharing that out on a building level?
It'll certainly be at a classroom level if there's an outbreak, and then it's just a matter of what level of exposure happens. But we will have that data at a district level, and I'll be reviewing it very publicly and share it out. We don't have plans for like an ongoing interactive, dashboard or anything like that. I think we just have to see kind of where this goes. But again, the data is without names is something that's important, and I think people need to know about.
No, I 100% agree. And I think that if you're sharing it out periodically and remaining transparent about it, then parents can rely more on, factual information that's coming from the district than hearsay of my neighbor's best friend, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And I guess I would say here, because I know there's, been some conversation, every issue that we've had thus far, people have been extremely forthcoming, very proactive and conservative in their approach to quarantine, taking days off, whatever it needs to make sure they do the right things as well. We've experienced that both with staff and students and parents. All right, I'm going to jump over to the MOU for OPSI, that is our classified staff. Essentially, this MOU kind of reiterates some of the things that happened last spring when we went to remote learning. Essentially, this allows us to redeploy OPSI staff members into different areas as needed for district operations. So, we're not serving lunch to most of our students, though there are some students who are here all day, but most of our students are not. So we can redeploy some of our kitchen workers midday to help with cleaning throughout buildings and preparing for that midday transition. So that's just an example of how we would use it now. We really don't have any other areas that we can push people out or we would transition them under our current model, other than maybe some aides that can help with midday cleaning as well. If we were to transition to remote, this does not prohibit us from having to riff or make some tough decisions at that point. But it does give us the flexibility from an operation standpoint right now to do what we need to do to keep our employees employed, and also provide the appropriate sanitation and cleaning that needs to happen throughout the district.
I'm not sure that the OPSI staff members that stepped into different roles in the spring were sufficiently recognized either. But having 3 children whose stuff was picked up from the school later in the year and seeing that process and the amount of stuff that had to be labeled and gathered. And that was just one area where our staff members just stepped in and did a role that's completely not within the realm of their normal expectations. And so I appreciate everyone's flexibility. And I think that the community needs to be aware that, of how flexible the staff members are being to just keep moving things forward as seamlessly as possible.
Absolutely. So those are the 2 recommendations on the agenda today.
I will motion that we approve the superintendent's recommendations 4A and 4B.
For a second. I'll second it then.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were seconding it.
I did too. I wrote it down. I thought you said I second.
That's all right. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none. Mrs. Ashley, can you take the roll, please? Or yeah.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. Burrows,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right. Is there any other business?
I would just like to recognize both union leaders. There's been a lot of work and a lot of conversation to go, not only to this MOU, but to many others that the board has approved and that we've worked through. I think both our union presidents understand the importance of what we do and getting us back here and all the implications around that. And I appreciate their leadership.
All right. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020 at 6 p.m. And I believe that's in the PAC. Is that right?
PAC lobby.
PAC lobby. All right. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I'll second.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. Burrows,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,